we go for launch.
5,
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
4,
My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer.
This whole thing is insane.
3,
Quiet, please. I am analyzing.
Where's the kaboom?
2,
There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
1.
How about it, kids? Are you giving us a fair break? We've tried to treat you fair and square, but unnecessary noises and disturbances drive away adults. And we need adult trade to stay in business. You can cooperate and help us keep this theater quiet, or we'll be forced without further notice to evict all disturbance makers and to refuse them future admission to this theater. Now, don't make us do it. Let's give each other a fair break. Thanks, the management.
Lights out. And now the movies, folks. Quiet! Sure was.
Greetings, my fellow galactic travelers, and welcome back to Planet 8. This is your mission commander Larry speaking to you from our hidden base. Chief Engineer Bob is here by my side as always in the command center, and circling Planet 8 in our orbital spy satellite is Reconnaissance Officer Karen. And we are back. Your intrepid crew has taken a step back to take a look at 50s science fiction films. Not just 50 science fiction films, the best of 50 science fiction films, in our humble opinion. Let's kick it over to the satellite. Walker, take it away.
Yeah, in our opinion. So it could be almost anything that was science fiction. But no, we were talking about, what are the best? What do we feel like is the best? And, looking at it, one of the things you realize about sci-fi in the 50s is that it was a great decade for science fiction films. I mean, there were so many sci-fi films that came out in the 50s, and there was a lot of variety, but, when we started looking at it, some themes sort of became apparent in the 50s. And they, it relates to what was going on at the time, of course. So some of the things we started seeing was themes related to the Cold War, nuclear war or the threat of nuclear war, radiation. Radiation does weird things to people. or critters. So that was a theme that started coming out. And of course, the threat of invasion. It could be invasion from outer space. It could be invasion from within. It could be, invasion from another country, and it could be disguised as outer space. There could be all sorts of things, but the fear of being taken over somehow. What if your mind or your body was taken over? So there were all these sort of concerns that were going on. Yes, we at Planet 8 have been taken over many times. We might be under the spell of something right now, actually. So these themes were plentiful, and they played out in a variety of ways. And some of these films were big budget and had some pretty great effects. Some of them were kind of cheap, but they were still interesting. Sometimes there were pie plates on a little thread. You just didn't know what you were going to get, but they were all pretty interesting films. And one thing I wanted to bring up was some ideas that I saw in reading the late, great Bill Warren's book, Keep Watching the Skies. And I know we mentioned that book before on here, but it really is a treasure trove of information about sci-fi films. And one of the things that Bill put forward, kind of an interesting argument about some influences on 50s films, is he said that two big influences on 50s films were King Kong and Ray Bradbury. So he said that the 1933 King Kong film was re-released in 1952. And so when this was re-released, it was really heavily advertised on both TV and radio, and it wound up making more money in re-release than it did in its original run. And so when the studios saw that, they were like, well, heck, we got to make more movies like this. And so then after that, you start getting all these giant monster movies. You've got Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, all the mutated giant insects. And of course, probably the king of monsters. That's right. Big G, Godzilla. So I think he is spot on there with that influence from from King Kong. And then the second one, Ray Bradbury, a lot of different science fiction writers were becoming a little more prominent in the 50s. Their stories were being published in more mainstream magazines, but Ray Bradbury seemed to emerge as kind of the most acceptable, I guess you would say, of these writers. And so he was able to get some of his stories turned into film, or he was able to work as a script writer in Hollywood. So his influence was seen on a variety of films, whether it was, like Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which was based on a short story of his, or something like It Came from Outer Space, where he wound up doing some of the script writing. So I thought those were two interesting ideas that Bill had put forth in his book. And when you look at the numbers of films made, it was really crazy counting them up, but especially as you go kind of later into the 50s. In 56, there were 25 films. In 57, there were 34, and in 58, there were 36. So it just kind of a massive amount of films that were made. So with that as some preface, I guess we could start rolling into our selections for our picks as best films.
Yes. So as far as the list go, Bob, you want to start us off?
Sure. Now, I know a lot of times when you think of 50s sci-fi, you think of low budget black and white efforts. But the first one that I'm taking, and I'm going to go in chronological order today. So the first one was from 1954, and it had a budget of $9 million. Now, in the 50s, that was like astronomical.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what studio back in the 1950s would have that kind of bread? Well, Disney, of course. So I went with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Nice.
Yeah, that was a film. It was actually full color. It was one of the first color features to be done in CinemaScope. So it was a nice, wide, full color, bright palette, colorful, big budget movie based on an 1870s novel by Jules Verne. Now, if we take a step back from the movies for a second and just think about Jules Verne, here's a guy in the late 1800s that's writing sci-fi. And he wrote 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He wrote The Invisible Man. Oh, no, it was H.G. Wells.
H.G. Wells, yeah.
He wrote, how was the other one? Jules Verne. Mysterious Island?
I don't know. I didn't. Yeah, I think he wrote The Mysterious Island.
And yeah, so I mean, let's bring in H.G. Wells. Between him and H.G. Wells, that was some amazing sci-fi. I mean, H.G. Wells had Invisible Man, War of the Worlds, and here were like two authors,
Time Machine,
late 1800s, that are looking far into the future and dreaming up stuff that really hadn't been dreamt up before. But if you think about Jules Verne and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, he came up with the Nautilus, the submarine, Captain Nemo, and quite a few of the things that the trappings that he used. Basically, in the novel, he had ordered like industrial equipment from different companies and amassed it, put it all together to make the Nautilus, which in the novel was a cigar-shaped ship that was battery powered. Now, by the time we got to the 50s, it became more of a steampunk styled ship that ran on atomic power. So other than that, the novel, the movie, they were pretty close. I read the novel a long time ago, so I'm sure there are differences, but they were pretty close. But the movie starred Kirk Douglas, James Mason, Phil Lucas, and one of our favorites, Mr. Peter Lorre. So it had a big cast, it had a big production, and it was basically Peter Lorre and Kirk Douglas and Paul Lucas were on this ship. It was one of the ships that Captain Nemo's Nautilus sank, but they were able to basically, Kirk Douglas was shooting harpoons at it from a boat, from a rowboat, and that got dropped into the ocean, so he escaped. And then Peter Lorre and Paul Lucas basically fell off the ship into the water. So between the three of them, they found their way to the Nautilus and were brought on board. Now, of course, Captain Nemo could care less about Kirk Douglas and Peter Lorre. But the third was a renowned scientist, so he figured he could use him. He had heard about him, he'd read his findings, and he wanted him to be his partner on the ship. But of course, he resisted. But it goes on from there. It's a good story. It's a good cast, interesting characters. And of course, they fight the giant squid, which was a giant animatronic squid. But with $9 million, you can make a pretty darn good looking animatronic squid. I did read that originally the battle with the squid on the top of the Nautilus was shot at dawn in calm waters. And then they decided to reshoot the entire scene at twilight with rough waters and a thunderstorm. A, to add to the drama, and B, to hide all the wires.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Controlling this squid. So they did that. There was also, they originally wanted the portholes in the Nautilus in the background to have these animated fish. And so Disney animators went in and they did all these scenes of animated fish and squids and things that looked like animated fish. So they decided not to go with that. But it was mainly water and bubbles and things in the background. But there were some interesting, there's even a shot of the Nautilus surfacing that was done in animation. But again, it didn't match all the live action shots, so it was kind of dropped. If you've got the 2-disc DVD set of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, all that stuff is included on there. And there's also some cool clips from The Wonderful World of Disney we all used to watch on Sunday nights that talked about the making of the film and introducing the actors and characters and things. But it got a wide release. It did really well, and it became a classic for Disney. It was one of their first kind of big budget live action fantasy type films.
It was huge. They actually had an attraction at Disneyland in Tomorrowland, I was reading, where they had displays of models and whatnot from the movie, and people would just walk through and, look
Well,
at all that.
originally, like Disneyland in Hollywood, down in Hollywood or Anaheim,
Mhm.
had the submarine ride, which was the gray sort of submarines. But Disney World in Florida, the subs were all designed after the Nautilus. So how cool would that be?
Very cool. Sadly, it went to bye-bye land. They can't ride suckers anymore. But
People bought them at auctions and they have them like on top of their houses and in their back.
they're podcasting from within their Nautilus right now. That's too bad.
Sitting in the time machine inside the Nautilus.
Yeah. Well, my friends, I'm gonna go next. And since Bob is going by numerical order with years, I'm going to go with 1953 as well. One of the first, if not the first, color version of showing UFOs and aliens, Invaders from Mars. And I hadn't seen this for a while. And it's from a kid's point of view. So that's kind of cool. If you were a kid watching this, you had that angle to it. And I know a lot of people have argued, some of the sets or the scenery appear larger depending on the angle that they filmed it. And they're saying, well, the thought was to film it in 3D. And so they had these sets built a certain way. And then some folks are saying, we didn't even invent 3D technology. There were no 3D films yet. What they did is they filmed it that way or built the sets that way to give a dreamlike quality. And spoiler alert, at the end of the film, was it a dream or was it a deja vu of what was yet to come? That was part of the fun with the ending of this film. But David is the young boy, is awakened by a loud thunderstorm. They live out in the country, and this flying saucer, not only does it land, it goes underground. And then whoever goes to investigate, whether it's a sheriff or a farmer or whoever, they get abducted. And they get his father, as a matter of fact, was the first one. They get this little bead on the back of their neck. And this thing carries through to the X-Files. How do you know someone was abducted? Look at the back of their neck. If they were bit by a vampire, you check, the jugular. And so, this is 1953, and the father, once he gets not replaced, but I guess they control him or abduct him, and he's not himself. The son realizes this, and he actually smacks his kid. And there goes poor David, little Davy, and he's like, that's not my dad. That's And one of the great things, having not lived in the 50s, I was at a talk that Bill Shatner gave, and he talked about living in the 50s. And they had the McCarthy hearings, and it was the invaders within the United States, the communists. And funny story, we find out that back in the 80s, they did put communist spies in the United States in rural Americana, had families and kids, and they were discovered, and it's like, well, do we export them? Do we, anyway, that's just a weird, bizarre fact. So, these aliens, the Martians, are these tall, bug-eyed creatures. And I can't think of the name of the actor, but the guy that played Gort
Oh,
was
Lock Martin.
Lock Martin. Yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot to write his name down. And so you had these soldiers at the end because they finally believe Davy, and they're fighting, this huge 7 foot something Martian. And then for other scenes, they hired smaller actors and they put regular sized people in the Martian outfits, are able to manipulate. No CGI back then, kids. They just made things up like that. Still freaky to this day was the main Martian brain,
Oh,
right? Which
creepy.
head and shoulders looked like a bust. No hands or appendages. He just kind of had this like
The little
mummy thing.
tendril things.
Yeah, with the off his.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't speak. He would just talk to your mind, and you'd see his eye. Anyway, still freaky. I like this for a good 15, 20 years. Anyway, the army gets involved. They're shelling where the ship is, and they all escape. And it's an interesting, again, little technique that they use. They're all running, hauling ass, and Davy is recollecting what all happened before he started running, escaping with everyone. And that kind of sets off the dream sequence. And then he wakes up and he runs into his mom and dad's room, 1953. So mom and dad have two separate beds, like the Ricardos on And Davy, it's okay. We're fine. No, but you guys were at the hospital. You were running, and no, Davy, it's just lightning and thunder. You had a nightmare. And the kid's like, okay, can I see the back of your neck? No, just kidding. But he, goes back to lay down, and he looks out his window because he hears lightning and thunder, and lo and behold, the UFO that started off the film goes across the landscape and lands in the sand pit, and the movie ends. I enjoy that kind of an ending. I thought it was great. It was fun. I was reading that audiences in London did not like those kinds of endings. They wanted it to be definitive. So once Davy wakes up, credits. That's it. It was a nightmare. So you watched it in England, you had more of an ending to it than we did. We had surreal. What I thought was interesting too, they kind of rushed this. Like I said, it was one of the first color films. They were trying to, and you see a UFO, although it's not as good as where was it? I am so sorry. I lost it.
You kind of compare it to another.
Yeah,
War of the Worlds, or
the War of the Worlds. They had much better saucers. Well, not saucers, but alien craft, and the sounds were a lot better and all that. But they rushed this one out so you can see like invaders in color.
Quinn Martin production.
Yeah, I know. The whole concept of invaders. There was a 1986 remake by Tobe Hooper, and they had, Davy was in it as a cop, an adult in the film. But
it was Karen Black.
Yeah.
See, I can't say that I saw any of these movies when they first came out in the theater. I'm born yet, but I did see the 83 remake in the theaters when it came out.
I had heard that thing as well about the British version that they they did not like the ending, so they redid it where it's just like, oh yeah, it was just a dream and everything's okay. That's really odd, you know. You think about differences in cultures and what they like and what they don't like, and yeah, funny that that's how it went over there. Especially when you consider the next decade, they're putting out movies like Village of the Damned, and you know, it's like,
They got
okay,
over it.
so
It was a dream.
it's just a dream. It's okay. Everything's fine. Well,
Walk.
gentlemen, my pick, what I went with for the my number one, um, is well known to us all. The Thing from Another World from 1951, ostensibly directed by Christian Nyby, but maybe directed by the great Howard Hawks. Made Red River and what, Rio Bravo and a bunch of other great films. Kind of like the whole situation with Poltergeist. And, you know, that was, yeah, was it Toby Hooper? Was it Steven Spielberg? You know, depending on who you talk to, you will hear different stories. But undeniably a very well-made film. I think the thing that keeps people going back to The Thing from Another World is how it uses dialogue, overlapping dialogue, to make a very realistic feeling film. You know, it's not like any of these characters are super well defined, but the way the actors all work together makes it feel very real to the viewer, very natural, I guess, which is probably one of the things that just sells it and sells this concept of this alien invader who is essentially stalking these folks on a very isolated Antarctic base, you know. I'm not going to go into details of the story because I assume most of our listeners or viewers already know the story. And if you don't, you can go to our episode number 24, Something About the Thing, from April 8th, 2019, where we talk about all of the different versions of the Thing that have been filmed.
Up to that.
Yes, up to that point.
I do want to say, Walker, real quickly, I thought it was interesting that this is one of the few films from the 50s where, you know, the invader or the alien didn't necessarily look like us. There are a lot of these films, maybe lower budget films, where they look like us, you know, and that's the scary part. Maybe
Yeah,
they're not the same, but
it's interesting too because okay, so James Arness, who would be Marshall Dillon on Gunsmoke a few years later on, played the alien, and as most people know, you know, he was kind of a big, bald guy with some, you know, thorns on his hands. He didn't look especially alien, especially when you think about what, you know, John Carpenter would do with the same story many decades later. But I read, again, in Bill Warren's excellent book, Keep Watching the Skies, and this may be an apocryphal story. Did it happen? Did it not? But he had heard that at one point, Howard Hawks had an alien creature built that was based off of the original John Campbell story in Who Goes There. And so it had like multiple eyes and it had tentacles, and that they had filmed the scene where, you know, where the creature is bursting through a door in with a corridor, a long corridor. And they said they had filmed a scene where it had these long tentacles that shoot out and pull itself down a corridor. And they had filmed it in reverse. So it had the tentacles down the corridor, and then they just filmed it like backwards with the tentacles shooting back. And that Hawks was so disturbed by how weird and grotesque the creature looked that he was like, no, this is too out there. We're not going to put something like that on the screen. And that he went instead with the more human looking design with Arness. I don't know if that's a real, Bill Warren said he could not verify the story or not. So who knows if that's what they did. That would be really cool to see, though. If some picture popped up somewhere, that would be awesome. But yeah, I guess you're right in some ways, Larry. I mean, most of the aliens that pop out of the spaceships, pretty much, there's a few exceptions, but most of them, yeah.
It just saved them money, I think, and you just
Well,
had
yeah.
to, you know.
I mean,
But
I think the interesting thing is at the end when he's being electrocuted and fried, it's James Arness like writhing around, and they cut to the actors. They cut back. They had a midget or a small person
yeah, I think it
dressed
was.
up as the thing, and he's like writhing
Mhm.
around as he supposedly shrinks as he's
Right. Well, it was innovation again, right? They didn't have all those great special effects. So it's like, well, how will we make him look smaller? Oh, well, I know a guy, he's not very tall. We'll have him come in. And there's a few photos around with Arness posing next to the small guy. And they're both in their outfits. And yeah, that's pretty neat. But yeah, I think this film, I picked it because not only for its overall quality, but also because of how influential it was. You've got John Carpenter later on redoing it. And I think Alien borrows a lot from this as well, with that sense of isolation and something stalking the people in the film. So yeah, that's my pick.
I read an article where, to just, and there's a lot of alien monster sci-fi movies where they either don't show you the creature or it'll be in shadow.
Mhm.
And so this movie, they had it kind of in shadow. And when they redistributed the film, someone corrected the color,
Oh, I read that too.
lit the whole thing up. And it's like, oh, okay, that's what the monster looks like.
Yeah.
What are you going
What
to
can
do?
you do?
Well, it's one thing too to shoot the creature in shadow, but then you have all these publicity stills in perfect lighting, and here he is.
Not quite as scary as way the film intended it.
No.
I think it's back to Bob.
Back to Bob.
Back to Bob, back to not to the future, but back to that. Let's see, I moved my way up to 1957 and chose a film called The Mysterians.
Mm.
This is a Japanese film produced by Toho Company. And I get my sci-fi specs on. It stars Kenji Sahara, who was fresh off of starring in Rodan. We've got Yumi Shirakawa, Momoko Kochi, who played Emiko in the original Godzilla, and Akihiko Hirata, who played Dr. Serizawa in the original Godzilla. And they starred in this. It was written by Takashi Kimura, and it was the first film released in color over there in Toho Scope, which I talked about CinemaScope.
Right.
Basically, it was just companies making things wider. And so Toho Scope was just slightly wider than CinemaScope. And they used that probably till about 1965 or so. And basically, the Mysterians, it is a invaders from space type movie. Japan really didn't have the Cold War paranoia that we had here.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just straight ahead, straightforward. They're aliens. Mm-hmm. They're coming down from the planet Mysteroid, and their planet was destroyed, and the radiation basically made their women fertile, or basically made their women sterile. So they wanted to come down here, take over an area of Earth, and mate with our women.
Oh my.
And of course, in the film in the 50s, it's like they want to marry the women. It's like,
marry.
Be good. We'll marry these women.
Would have been a different film if they were fertile and they just were throwing their kids out on the planet.
And he was a cattle at that point. But yeah, so Akihiko Hirata plays a astronomer who has been writing papers on people from another planet. And of
Just
course,
coincidentally.
nobody believes him, right? Until people from another planet actually show up. But it's your basic, straightforward invasion picture. Although they have probably one of the coolest robots from the 50s, Mogura, who looks like a giant 1950s appliance, drill on his nose and spines on his back, so he's able to drill underground.
That's what I thought. I kind of remember this.
Basically, he's not like Godzilla size. So he's going through this village of these little like 2-story huts and houses. And he's, they come up to about his chest, as he's walking through. But they're battling him with what they have available there. So they've got like machine guns and flamethrowers. So you don't have like jets and everything coming at him. And the way they finally defeat him, and this is beginning of the film, so he's defeated early on, but basically he's approaching a bridge and they end up blowing up the bridge and he goes down with it, and that's the end of him. But yeah, it's Akihiko Hirata, basically his character gets kidnapped by the aliens along with the some of the women. And they want him to they're picking his brain to find out more about the humans. But he ends up kind of double crossing them and getting everyone out of there. But it's basically, it's a good film, solid film. It led into a sequel, a very loose sequel called Battle in Outer Space. And The Mysterians, 1957, was coming right after Godzilla was 1954. Rodan was 56. So this was their first venture into sci-fi. It was also the very first time in Toho films that they had what we like to call Toho science. And they had these alpha ships that flew over and these Markalite beam cannons that basically were like giant sphere or giant like saucers, lenses that would absorb the heat ray from the aliens and bounce it right back at them, amplified. And they were using those to battle the Mysterians. Now, if you can go back and find the original dub of the Mysterians from the 50s, now if you get the I guess the Tokyo Shock Media Blasters release, that's a new dub. But you get that original dub, and the head lead Mysterian, which was played by Yoshio Tsuchiya, the voice was Ted Knight. Went on to be Ted Baxter on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. But he did the voice of the head alien. And Yoshio Tsuchiya, his agent told him not to take the part because the whole film he would just have this big helmet and these glasses on. You never saw his face. He thought, well, as an actor, you have to be able to act even when covered up. So he had all these alien hand gestures that he came up with and little alien language and things. And because of that, he would go on. He'd be in a lot of Toho films, but he actually went on to be the leader of Planet X in Monster Zero. So he got to apply more of his alien mannerisms to that. But
I wonder
it's brought over here by MGM. And I remember way back, take a journey with me, way back to the day of video stores and video rentals. And sometimes VHS and Betamax tapes would be sold to video stores and not to home video. So they knew the video stores were going to rent them out for $5 a night or whatever. So the studios and whatever would sell these movies to the video stores for like $80. $80 for a VHS tape or a Betamax or whatever. And I did talk a local video store into selling me a Betamax copy of The Mysterians for $80. I paid $80 to get Mysterians. So
Steep.
Back then, that's all you could do, right?
There was a shop, I won't mention the name, in San Francisco, and you'd go there and you'd slip them, a $20 bill and a blank cassette tape, and they'd burn you a copy off of their laser disc of the film. Of course, it wasn't dubbed or anything. It was just all in Japanese.
Right.
But that was the only way you could see some of these movies. So, it's kind of like, that's cool. All right. Yours truly is going to 1954. And this was a British film. Came out in England first, and then a year later, United States. Devil Girl from Mars. And I want to thank Will Viharo of Thrillville for influencing this pick. I saw this. I was looking at a list of sci-fi films in the 50s. I'm like, oh, I don't think Will showed this at Thrillville, but if he could have, he would have. The poster's very cool. The poster says, "The fantastic night of terror that menaced the fate of the world." A lot of the 50s sci-fi movies, a lot of it was marketing, these posters, and maybe not to the degree that Will Castle went with his gimmicks in his horror films, but these posters are art unto themselves. So, a female alien is sent from Mars to acquire human males to replace their declining male population.
This is a theme.
This is a theme.
A theme we didn't catch the first time. Yeah.
A lot of the Martians, Venusians, and Jupiterians are coming for men and women.
And wasn't there a film, Mars Needs Women? Was that the 50s or 60s? We'll have to.
I know it was dubbed in a song, Mars Needs Women. Female alien is sent from Mars. When negotiation, then intimidation fails, she must use force to obtain cooperation from a remote Scottish village where she has landed her crippled flying saucer. The female alien, Naya, and she doesn't have like a crew or anything like that. It's just her, and she looks like us. So
I kind of remember this film.
yeah, she's a female commander from Mars. She's heading to London in her flying saucer, and she's part of an advanced alien team looking for Earthmen to replace the declining male population on our world, the result of a devastating war of the sexes. So anyway, she what's that, Walker?
I'm just laughing.
Yeah. It wasn't made by Ed Wood, but it has that kind of vibe to it. I mean, they're doing the best they can with the material that they have, but so she's forced to land in the remote Scottish moors, and she's armed with a ray gun that can paralyze or kill, and is accompanied by a tall, menacing robot named Chani. There's a bar in this village, and she meets some people, and she's telling them, USOBs, I'm an advanced alien party from Mars, and we need your men, and mayhem ensues. She realizes that the only road to victory, the bar patrons realize the only way to victory requires trickery, and so they come up with this plan on how they're going to sabotage her ship as she tries to go to London. So they come up with this plan, and at the last minute, one of the guys is alone at the bar. Justin is, and he's now free from her mind control, and offers to go with her of his own free will. After takeoff, he successfully sabotages her flying saucer, sacrificing himself to save the men of Earth and atoning for the death of his wife. The survivors celebrate their escape with a drink at the bar.
So he made the ultimate sacrifice of going to this planet and having sex the rest of his life.
And saved all his barmates as well.
So they were probably mad at him.
that's pretty much it. I mean, it's a fun movie. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. You know, there's comparisons in Day the Earth Stood Still that Klaatu is kind of like a Christ-like.
Hey, don't steal my thunder here.
Sorry. Well, um, yeah. What they're saying is Naya was intended to evoke an anti-Virgin Mary image. I don't know how successful that was, other than she was really horny and pining for men in this little quaint.
She really didn't sound too much like a virgin.
Well, so
Not
anyway,
wanting to remain one.
She was a bad girl.
yeah. Devil Girl from Mars. The sound editor was Jerry Anderson, and he would
Oh,
create Thunderbirds. And to save time and money, composer Edwin Ashley reused his Sabre of London TV series score for the film. So if you're a fan of Sabre of London, you may recognize the music. Otherwise, have at it and enjoy.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, let's kick it over to Walker.
Well, that's a little hard to follow up. But there is the connection in that my second pick is 1951's The Day the Earth Stood Still, with the wonderful theremin work of Bernard Herrmann. Well, he didn't play the theremin, but he hired a couple of guys to play the theremin. And he did a lot of electronic music in this, which at the time was extremely futuristic. So yeah, Day the Earth Stood Still, directed by Robert Wise, very prestigious director, had done a bunch of stuff prior to this, maybe at that time still best known for being the editor on Citizen Kane and having some bad blood with Orson Welles. But to many sci-fi fans, he will be known as the director of Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Dun, 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 dun.
Mm-hmm. And you know, it's funny, this now I'm going off on a sidebar here, but they were getting Orson Welles to narrate the trailer for Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And he's like, you know, at that point in time, Orson Welles was doing commercials for frozen peas. So it was sort of like you could get Orson to do a lot of things, right? You do the voiceover. These peas are picked in the dark of night in a valley in France. They are wonderful peas, you know, whatever. He was doing all this stuff. And so the story is that they're like, yeah, you know, Orson, would you narrate the trailer for Star Trek: The Motion Picture? Yeah, how much is it? Yeah, okay, I'll do the thing. So he's reading the thing. He hasn't read it beforehand. They get him in the studio and he's reading, you know, William Shatner is Captain James T. Kirk. Leonard Nimoy is Mr. Spock, blah, blah, blah. You know, and that trailer, he goes through the whole cast name in a Robert Weiss production. And he's like, what the because he hates Robert Wise because he felt like he didn't edit Citizen Kane very well. So he's like, this is a G.D. Bob Wise production. He was livid, but finished the trailer.
Being the professional that he is.
That he was, and wanting the money. But anyway, back to The Day the Earth Stood Still. Probably the prototypical aliens land on Earth with a warning film, I suppose. I don't know if it had happened before this. This was 51. So, and this was a big budget film for the time. They put a lot of money, 20th Century Fox put a lot of money into this picture, and it shows. You know, they did wonderful footage of the spaceship coming and landing in Washington, D.C. You've got the images of the robot Gort, you know, standing there and vaporizing tanks and other military gear. So there's some very, very cool shots in this film. Some very good acting. You got Michael Rennie as Klaatu, the messenger or diplomat from outer space, however you want to look at it. and some other quality actors as well. As the commander mentioned, a lot of sort of Christian overtones there with Clay too. So, he takes on the name John Carpenter, Mr. Carpenter, JC. So, and he's also killed and brought back to life. He's a messenger. You could say it's heavy-handed. It kind of is, but it's a well-made film. And I think the message is still pretty good. I mean, it sort of plays on our fears of nuclear aggression and our fears of the alien. But basically, he was telling us, hey, if you guys start bringing all of your nuclear issues out into space, we're not having it. So you better
you down.
Yeah, you better get your house in order, which is still true today, sadly enough. So yeah, it's a really good sci-fi I wouldn't say adventure, but it's kind of suspense movie maybe, and definitely a message picture, and it has some pretty good effects. Who doesn't like a robot zapping stuff,
Oh yeah.
And for the 50s, I think you've got Gort and you've got Robbie probably are the two big robot guys that came out of the 50s. So that is my selection.
The thing that always amazed me about Gort is the fact that he looked like just one big seamless.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they actually had two Gort suits.
Right.
One had a zipper up the front, and the other had a zipper up the back. So whenever they'd shoot him from the front, they'd use the suit with the zipper in the back. And if they shot him from the back, they'd use the suit with the zipper in the front. So you never saw a zipper or a seam or anything like that when you saw Gort.
And then for like really long scenes, they just had a big model, like fiberglass model of Gort that they could stand out there. So
they had to time it right with the zipper in the front for the number ones and the zipper in the back for the number twos.
But
a very fine film. I don't know that I ever noticed any of the religious overtones, undertones, even now. I mean,
it depends on who you are and what you're looking for.
yeah, I guess that's true. It's a really good sci-fi film to me. They weren't coming for our women. They weren't coming for our men. They were just coming to warn us, grow up or get out.
Kind of interesting now, if you think about it, we're inundated all the time with warnings about AI or, news about AI. And if you think about it, Gort is sort of an AI. He's a robot, but he thinks and is able to, think on his own. And Clay too and his people have given over a lot of their decision making to this, these robots. He says, hey, Gort and others of his kind, we've kind of handed over decision making so that, if somebody breaks the rules, they're able to go out and punish them. And, we've given them complete authority over us in these matters. And nowadays, well, even then, I think people would be a little, uncertain about something like that. But especially now, thinking about giving a machine any kind of authority over human beings.
They still had a modicum of control. You sit there, Klaatu, Barada Nikto, and he stops what he was going to do.
Well, but that was to revive Clay 2, but Clay 2 sounds pretty darn certain that in other affairs, like if they're making war against each other, they're going to use nuclear weapons or whatever, that all of those robots have authority over the humans, over the living folks. So
we will discuss this further as we go through the sci-fi decades and we come to Skynet. But
yes. Okay. So I think, is it Bob's turn again?
Yeah, we go Bob's third pick.
Third pick, we're going back to the land of the rising sun. We're going back to 1958
Hmm.
or the H-Man.
Mm.
Now, the interesting thing about the H-Man, also written by Takashi Kimura. Takashi Kimura basically wrote all the serious Toho films. And then you got Shinichi Sekizawa that wrote a lot of the more lighthearted movies. And his characters had more humor to them. But Kimura wrote H-Man. And this is basically, it's got sci-fi, it's got Yakuza gangster type stuff, it's got, damsels in distress and everything. It's got everything you'd want to see. But basically it starts off with this drug smuggler, and he's out in the rain. He's trying to get to the getaway car, and suddenly something crawls up his pant leg and he dissolves in the rain. And the driver looks back, doesn't see him. A cop comes and asks him what he's doing there, and he just claims nothing. I'm out. He splits, and they find just the suitcase full of drugs and the guy's clothes on the ground. So of course they think that they're looking for some guy running through the streets naked. He just dropped his clothes and off he went. But as it turns out, he was the first victim of the H-Man. Mm-hmm. And the H-Man, they are invaders. They don't really say what planet they're from or anything, but they're here on Earth. They're in their life that's in liquid form. And they're basically, it's almost like the Blob, although it was made basically the year before the Blob. And they're liquid. You see them oozing down walls and oozing across floors and oozing up people's pant legs and things, or pouring down on top of them. And the theory was that there was a fishing boat out in the bay near some H-bomb tests, and the whole crew was irradiated. And instead of dying from radiation poisoning, they became basically liquid people. And this is how you survive radioactive fallout. And they proved this with a couple experiments with frogs, where they bombard a frog with intense radiation, and you see the frog just kind of start bubbling, and he turns into just a puddle of liquid, which can move and around the Petri dish. So it follows the police investigating this whole drug smuggling ring, which takes them into the world of gangsters and into a seedy nightclub with Yumi Shimakawa as a nightclub singer. And basically, at the end, one of the smugglers kidnaps her, and she's running through the sewers. And the scientists have decided that the way to combat the H-Man is with fire. So they're dumping gas into all the waterways and sewers, and they're going to just light it all on fire. So the other two characters have to find her before she's lit up. And the person kidnapping her, of course, he tells her, take off your clothes, because he figures he'd float her clothes down the water and they'll see the clothes and figure she was absorbed by an H-Man. But it's a cool film. It's basically Japanese noir with all the lighting effects and the camera angles and the involvement of the gangsters and drug smugglers and things. And it's more than just your regular sci-fi film.
Is it in black and white?
It's in color.
Oh, it's in color. Okay. Huh.
I mean, basically, back then, Toho, they had the original Godzilla Raids Again, Half Human, and
I like Half Human.
But those were black and white. But once Rodan hit and that was in color, then everything from there on was pretty much color.
Well, I am pretty sure I have never seen that film, so I will have to check it out at some point here.
Will did show it at Thrillville once.
Did he?
Oh yeah.
I missed that one. Cool. Okay, well, my third film, 1956, an oldie but a goodie. One of my favorites, actually. This and the 1970s version, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And we've talked about this many, many times. Stars Kevin McCarthy, Dana Winter, a Don Siegel picture, and takes place in a fictional town, or is it fictional? Santa Mira, which sounds strangely familiar.
Yes.
Or to Santa Maria.
Mm-hmm. But I bet Santa Mira doesn't have as good a barbecue as Santa Maria.
This is true, but still,
I digress.
there's a
You
rock
digress.
down there. They got the Lompoc Flower Festival. Okay, I'll
Just don't say Nipamo.
yeah, Nipomo. um, anyway, though, yeah, we'll let that go. Pod people. So these aliens are vegetables, I guess, because they come from these pods, and they look like you. They think like you. They absorb you. They basically become a version of you that's almost indistinguishable from the original. And they do this while you sleep, and so there's added jeopardy. You know, how many hours can you stay awake to avoid the transition to becoming an alien or one of these pod people? There's a lot of great scenes in this, and like I said, we've talked about this before, but at the end of the film where he's like, they're here,
Mm-hmm.
warn everybody. Such a good movie. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've talked about this before, so you haven't seen it, I recommend you do.
Do you feel, we probably talked about this too. Do you have a preference between the 50s version and the 70s version?
You know, it's kind of like, you know, if you like candy bars, do you like the Milky Way better than the Snicker bar? Depends on your mood. They're both equally good movies about subject matter. It just depends on what mood you're in. I will say that the 70s was way more depressing and dystopian. There wasn't much hope in the 1950s version. There's no hope in the 1970s version.
The ending is much more downbeat, even.
Well,
Yeah,
they added hope to the 50s version.
Yes.
Because it was supposed to end with Kevin McCarthy going, "You're next, you're next."
Right.
But they added the cutaways to the to him in the sanitarium or whatever. And Whit Bissell, one of my favorite actors, he basically realizes what's going on. He hears the radio thing about pods showing up and stuff. Then he gets a hold of the military and they're heading out to stop all this. And that's kind of the hopeful part of it. But that wasn't even supposed to be in the original version.
Mm-hmm. They didn't want to have a situation like they had with the British invaders from Mars.
Afraid of the Brits. Reaction to the film.
But it's a great film. I mean, it totally plays into the whole commie infiltration kind of fear. Like, who can you trust? Who
Right.
can you trust your best friend? You thought you could, but guess what? Can you trust your wife, your husband?
Well, and
Yeah.
look, when you, not to give like a history lesson, but if you go back to the geopolitical structure of the world and politics back then, communism, we want to be your friend. Communism is better than capitalism. And, there's aggression and there's, contempt but it was, they built a wall in Berlin over, you know, anyway.
Better red than dead.
Yeah, it's hard for people to understand now, and even us. I mean, we were not, of age in that time. Well, we weren't even alive
No, but talking to uncles and aunts and
right.
grandparents, getting, like I said, Bill Shatner
Right.
talking about McCarthyism is very insightful. And that's that whole, they're with us, they're here. So who do you trust? And when your mother, your father, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend say, come on, lay down. You're a little tired. You'll feel better when you wake up.
Oh no.
But I love it. Yeah, in the 70s, 70s was a little more realistic to me. I'll say that, maybe because it was in color and it was in San Francisco and that was very well acted as well.
The bathhouses, you could relate.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And a food inspector, of all the vocations to have, a detective, not a soldier. I guess he could have been an architect. Oh, but that we've already covered that one. So
Hey, there's nothing wrong with
But,
architects.
Was it a caper or was it a rat turd?
that's a good question.
It's hard
We
to
never
tell.
really answer that movie.
Okie dokie.
All righty. Well,
Milwaukee,
my final selection.
your third final selection.
My third and final selection from 1954. Damn! I mean, this is a fantastic movie. If you had to pick one film to represent all of the mutated critters, I think this is probably the best representative of radiation is a bad thing movies. This film is very similar to me to The Thing in that it feels very realistic, very natural. You've got a policeman, you got an FBI agent, and you got two scientists trying to figure out what the heck is going on. People are disappearing, somebody's stealing tons of sugar, buildings are getting broken into, little kids are disappearing. What the heck is going on? And of course, they find out that there are gigantic mutated ants who are looking for new sources of food. And we might be those new sources of food. But this is, they take a premise that you could just laugh at, but because of the way they play it so seriously, it's almost like a police procedural, It's like, okay, we went this place, we checked this thing out. And it's suspenseful in the first part because you don't know what's happening. And you're going along with the police and you're trying to understand it. And then they bring in the scientists and, oh, okay, now we figured it out. And then it's sort of a battle against time, especially when you find out about the two little kids that have disappeared, And I think I'm a kid of that time period, not the 50s, but, I grew up watching it on TV. And so to me, those giant ants look great. I don't have a problem with them. I know that they're, giant props that they constructed and everything, but they're good for me. I don't have an issue with it. I know a lot of people nowadays would watch it and go, wow, that's so fake. And it's like, well, I think I'd rather see that than CGI. I don't know. It just looks real to me. It's right there in the scene with the actors. But yeah, this is a really well-made movie. You've got James Whitmore, James Arness, Edmund Gwenn, who had played Santa Claus, playing a scientist. And then I am not familiar with Jane Weldon, I think was the daughter who was also a scientist, because you have to have the lady scientist who one of the guys falls for, right? And oddly enough, again, reading and Fess Parker in a small role too in the mental hospital, but he wasn't crazy. Oddly enough, yeah, there you go. I guess originally reading Bill Warren's book, one of the scripts, they went through a number of scripts. Because it was set in the Southwest, originally they were going to have one of the police characters be a Native American from like Indian Affairs or something. And you think about it, yeah, Southwest, okay, that makes sense. But the powers that be decided not to do that. But I thought that would have been an interesting twist to introduce to it. I've also just watched 2 seasons of Dark Winds, so to me that makes a lot of sense. And if you haven't seen Dark Winds, it's a really good show about Navajo policemen. So
It is good.
yeah. So yeah, them, it's a fantastic movie. I'm sure I don't think we've done a whole episode on it, but I think we did an episode very early in the podcast on big bugs. So I know we must have discussed it there, but I think as far as representing sort of radiation, mutation, it's an excellent film.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with that movie basically. Used to be always show on Channel 44, and we used to watch it every single time it came on.
Yep. It's good
Still
old
holds up today.
yippers.
I will say, not to create any,
Just say it.
I had a giant spider on display for Halloween, and the legs were strong enough to hold up its giant body. And I'm done. I won't talk about it anymore.
Okay. We won't get into the physics of it.
Bob, do you have some honorable mentions for us? We're going to do a honorable mention round, and then we'll get into our censor sweep.
Well, I was going to use one of these movies. I ended up going with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but one would be Invasion of the Saucermen, classic AIP film, one of the first movies to use the big cabbage-headed bug-eye type.
The veins pulsating.
Which was a Paul Blaisdell creation. And man, I don't know who came up with the extra eyeballs on the top of the hands and the needles that extended from the fingers to inject you with alcohol. But pure genius. And a great, comic performance by Frank Gorshin. What more could you want? But yeah, and I remember when the Union City Drive-In closed down. On the final night of the drive-in, they had 4 50s movies. They had one screen, they had 4 screens. One screen was Rio Bravo. One screen was Go Johnny Go. One screen was I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. And the other screen was Invasion of the Saucermen. I took my daughter, who was 10 at the time, to see Invasion of the Saucermen. And she thought that was just so cool because not only is it a good movie, but at the end, the Saucermen can't stand light. So all the teenagers park their cars in a circle and turn on their headlights and, fry these aliens. So of course, when they did that, everyone at the drive-in turned on their headlights on their cars, all started honking. And that was kind of like one of those audience participation things that my daughter thought was so cool.
Nice.
The other one would be The Blob.
Bob, what are these drive-ins that you're speaking of?
Well, they were very cool. If you've ever been to a drive-in, I pity your poor soul. But
awesome.
Yeah, now The Blob. Everybody knows The Blob. Blob has one of the greatest theme songs of any science fiction movie.
Absolutely.
And it's what more can I say? Steve McQueen as a 30-something-year-old teenager. And and it was also British probably didn't like the end either because it came up with the end and then kind of morphed into a question mark. so I kind of left it open. But
Did
yeah.
you ever see the sequel? It was in the 1970s.
Yeah. Well, there was a 1984 remake.
Yeah.
The remake in
Actually,
72.
The
It
Blob.
was the Blob Part 2, and I remember Larry Hagman and
Yes.
Meredith playing drunkards.
Very strange movie.
It was just so bizarre, but the British would have really hated that one. Cool. Okay, my honorable mentions are This Island Earth.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't call them aliens; they were mutants. The Metalunans,
The Metaluna Mutants.
Metaluna mutants, and basically they get they're flying in a plane, and the plane there's this ray, and they suck them up to the planet, and there's a war going on, and the communication device, we use it to communicate with Walker and the satellite.
The Interocitor.
Interocitor. I was thinking Verocitor. Interocitor. So we had Interocitor up at the Star Wars bar, the 7 Stars bar, when we did our party. Anyway, it's a great film if you haven't seen it. Those mutants with the big head. I have one here. Oh, I do. He's way back there.
I see him.
And what was interesting, this was a Universal Studios release in 1955, and it came out as a double feature with Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy.
Yep.
But my second honorable mention in the vein of Abbott and Costello is Abbott and Costello Go to Mars. And they actually end up going to Venus because they make a mistake. And wouldn't you know it, the women on Venus are looking for men. And they find little Abbott to be so adorable. But there are these balloons, and you tell the truth, or else the balloon will explode. And the question was, did you look at the other women? And he says, no, absolutely not. It explodes, breaks the queen's heart, and they banish them then from Venus. But that's a good movie if you guys get a chance to see it. It is funny, Abbott and Costello.
Well, speaking of that, I'll put in a little plug.
Yeah.
Go to YouTube and you search creature features. I'm on an episode with Have Rocket Will Travel with the Three Stooges. That was a classic 50s sci-fi film, let me tell you.
Cool. Walker, your honorable mention.
Well, my first honorable mention is a film from 1958 called It, Terror from Beyond Space.
Wow.
It's
a good one.
It's a little schlocky.
That's good.
But it's a story of survival on a spaceship, on a rocket ship, a real rocket ship, not a, fancy giant spaceship, but a, basically several stage rocket ship. These folks were coming back from Mars, and somehow this monstrous creature has gotten aboard the ship, and he's picking them off. Does this sound familiar? Might sound like the plot of another movie, which came out many years later. So many people do think that It, Terror from Beyond Space was a bit of inspiration for Alien. Maybe, who knows? But it's a lot of fun to watch. And I went on our friend Billy D's podcast, Monsters and Magazines, a few years ago, and he and I kind of went around and around talking about this film. So if people want to hear more about it, they can go over to his podcast and look that episode up. But it's a lot of fun to watch. It's crazy. They wind up shooting bazookas inside the spaceship, which I don't recommend. Not a good idea. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. And then I was going to say for my other honorable mention, I was looking at This Island Earth, but I also had The Blob as a potential one, but one we haven't mentioned is War of the Worlds. which, is just an excellent film from that time, George Powell production. And, just gorgeous. The color in that is just outrageous. And the war machines, the design of those, the design of the aliens, the Martians is
Iconic.
fantastic. So well worth a look if somebody hasn't seen it, or if they haven't seen it in a while, go back and watch it. It's a fun movie.
If you haven't seen it, why not?
What's wrong with you?
The only thing I'll add to it is that if you look at it, the suit was worn by Ray Crash Corrigan, pretty big guy.
The mask.
The mask was too small.
Yeah.
So he had to stick his chin out of the mouth. So what they did was they just painted his chin to look like a tongue. So it looks like he has this big tongue in his mouth, and it's actually Corrigan's chin. So watch for that if you see the movie.
You do what you have to.
The chin cameo.
I tell you. All right, kids. We've come to that part of the show where we have our censor sweep. Bob, you got a few things to share with us?
Just two. One's an older book that I have that I didn't just come across, but Queso Morase basically passed away recently. And if you say, hey, who is he? I'm sure you've seen a lot of his creations, because he basically made the monster suits for all the early Godzilla and Toho movies. He made Godzilla, he made Rodan, he made Ghidorah. On the cover of this book, he's standing there with Baragon. So he made a big contribution to the Japanese monster landscape, and may he rest in peace. The other book I just picked up, and it's from Marvel.
Wow, I never heard of that.
That I share a Marvel Comics book, but this one is a collection of all the old Godzilla comics from Marvel, the old Herb Trimp Marvel Godzilla comics.
Does it have the crossover with the champions in it?
It has all of what was the original Godzilla comic. So he crosses over with the Avengers. He crosses over with, I think, Devil Dinosaur and Red Ronin. Yeah. And yeah, that's all in here. And they've released compilations of this before, but this is the first time they released them all in full color.
Nice.
So this thing is heavy hardback. If you pay full price, it's like $110.
Yikes.
So you can find it at a discount somewhere. I haven't looked to see what it is on like Amazon, but I got it from my local comic shop, and they gave me a pretty good discount on it. So
support that brick and mortar.
That's right.
Avoid
I'll
Amazon.
go back and relive. I've got all the original Godzilla comics here, along with like the Shogun Warriors and all that. But yeah, it's been a while since I've cracked them open. So
nice.
So now via this book.
Very cool. What do you got for us, Walker?
I got nothing. I got nothing for you guys. I haven't been buying anything new. I'm just not buying that much stuff, and I got to buy a new computer. So all I have is warm thoughts and wishing everyone much happiness in the days to come, the holidays and so forth. So
your hoarding is lacking.
That's about it. Yes, I'm an anti-hoarder now. So
are you watching anything? And you finish what's the not Wanda, Agatha.
I did watch that. I finished it yesterday. I feel like all Marvel's doing with the shows now is like everything has to introduce another character for another movie or show that's coming out. It's just, I don't know. It's like nothing is ever just a story on its own. I don't want to say too much because I don't know if other people are watching it, but I feel like this thing was just all to set up a character that may be involved in the Avengers movies. I don't know. It
Those
was,
are
I
like-
don't know.
Trying to set up the Young Avengers.
Yeah. I don't know how you guys felt about it.
I never liked the Young Avengers, and I think that's what they're doing too, about which is whatever. That's Marvel's decision to make.
I enjoyed it. It was kind of uneven. Some episodes were good. Others were kind of like, I don't know. But
Yeah, I don't know that I'd ever watch it again. Which is too bad. 'Cause I like the Agatha character in WandaVision.
when you have a TV show that starts out with the characters singing, let's take Partridge Family or the Monkees. That's cool. But then when you have a series where like halfway through the series or something, they start singing, let's say the Brady Bunch. Nah, not so much. So Agatha all along, yeah, about halfway through they start singing and stuff. It's like, okay, I don't need that.
Damn you, Bob. Now I'm gonna be sha-na-na-na-na-na-na-na, sha-na-na-na-na.
Have we reached our desperation point? Is that what we're saying? We start singing every episode?
Yeah, let's start sha-na-na-na.
Wait until we have the musical episode of Planet 8.
Oh my God. That's when we've jumped the shark for sure. It's our musical episode.
Your mission commander loves a good deal. He loves a bargain. He doesn't mind paying full price, but when Goodwill has spirit masks for $2.50, your mission commander is going to jump all over that, and it has these little nose guards in it and stuff. I mean, they're really up the ante on these designing these masks. $2.50. But I did pay full price for this bad boy. We didn't get the yard version. Matter of fact, I'm remiss in putting together a video of all the decorations and stuff we had.
For people who are only listening.
Oh, that's true.
What are you
YouTube
showing?
What are you showing?
I am showing a pumpkin monster that it's a home version rather than the one that you put out in the yard.
So he has like a skeleton body and a pumpkin head with eyes that light up.
Skeleton, it's kind of like vines.
Ah, okay.
That looks like a skeleton, yeah, and he lights up, and you've seen him at Home Depot if you've gone there around Halloween time. And if you're not watching on YouTube, why not? If we get 1,000 subscribers to YouTube, kids, we can start broadcasting live. So we're about halfway there. Subscribe to YouTube, share it with your friends, little plug. Anyway, thank you all. This draws this fun episode to a conclusion. We appreciate you guys. We hope you all had a happy and safe Halloween. I'll work on that video and put it together soon.
Mine's on YouTube. Watch for it.
It's up on YouTube. All
Bob's
right.
there.
There you go.
He's living in the future.
I had the day off after and I had nothing to do, so I threw together the video.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Stay safe, my friends. Take care. Thank you for watching. Planet 8, signing off.
On that note, this will conclude this transmission from Planet 8. We would like to thank all of our intergalactic audience for listening. Be sure to head on over to our website at www.planet8podcast.com, where you can get more information on this episode's topic.
For more conversation, find us on Twitter at Planet 8 Cast.
Or on Facebook at facebook.com/Planet8Podcast.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in each and every episode. We look forward to your input and opinions. Until next time, this is Planet 8 signing off. End transmission.
By George, he's got it. It is the end.